Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James, and I'm the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp, and I'm the broadcast engineer, and we are Vengeance.
I wanted to so bad, say my name's Paul James, and I am the actor. But I just chickened out at the last minute because I could never get it proper in my head. So I was going to do Vengeance too, but I thought that was a little too cliche, but...
Oh, thanks for that. Great.
Well, then... No, that's not what I meant. So, foot insert into mouth, big time. Not. I thought for myself.
I was gonna do it, but I'm too cool, so I let Josh do it. So that's cool. Yeah.
Oh, no, not at all. I am not as good at voices as you are. You know, which is I do them. Doesn't make them good. And I do my own thing, and I've got my own thing going on, but you can really do some imitations. So anyways, it's out of respect, but I thought it would like when we get off the podcast tonight, all night long, I'm going to be doing it and I'm going to sound great. But now in this moment, nerves. And then,
Well, so this Batman, though, he didn't necessarily Robert Pattinson, we're talking about the Batman. He didn't really dig into the grovelly voice type thing. I don't think that he really leaned on that. And is that something that you've come to expect from Batman? Does everybody know what your intensity of your love for Batman is as he shows his 1989 Batman shirt, which is one of the best logos of anything, by the way, I think ever.
It's good. I don't know if they know it or not, but I love the Bat. I have from the moment I was trying to think of when I first saw it. I saw a comic strip, not a comic book, a comic strip. Mm-hmm. And it was 4 or 5 panels, and it was like billionaire Bruce Wayne's parents murdered. And then the next one was him growing up, being sad, and Alfred helping him. And then the next one was, what am I going to do about this? I have to figure out how to stop crime in Gotham. And then the next one was a bat coming through the window. And he's like, I'll strike fear into criminals by disguising myself as a bat. And then a picture of him creeping like almost cat-like, arched over, creeping along this wall or this building. And from that point on, I can't not remember having Batman in my life. I just can't. That's
actually a nice, clean origin story, as opposed to the protracted origin stories we've seen in the past of how Batman became Batman. And this movie doesn't really spend any time with that. I put down in my notes Batman Year 2, because it's it's related to, I think, the Batman Year 1 comics, and I think that Matt Reeves took from a bunch of different things. But we're in this trend of everybody knows what Batman is, so we're going to try to put our own little stamp on it. So what do you think? Do you think Matt Reeves put his stamp on it?
Yeah, I do. I can't be objective. I just cannot be objective. Any form of the Batman, any time frame, Batman's like Shakespeare, you can set it in the Wild West, you can set it in 2022, you can set it in the 60s, you can camp it out, you can make it serious, you can make it bloody, you can make it vicious, you can make it scary, you can make it different things. He fits different, he transcends genre because it's about self-reliance and allowing something that was painful to maybe not make you have the best choices, but if it had gone to the dark side, literally, and Bruce Wayne had been twisted by the events of his life, then we'd have a whole nother character. But this character seems to want to do what's right. And there's a lot of debate about that. Vigilante, not vigilante, taking the law into your own hands. I do think Matt Reeves put his thumbprint on this. And in particular, what you were just talking about was a brilliant way to deal with it. And I think at some point we've talked about this, where I said, I don't have a problem with them always talking about the origin, because that's what makes him Batman. And in every comic book, every animation, every animated movie, he is always constantly being reminded that the reason why he's Batman is because the death of his parents, the murder of his parents. So how do you do that for the umpteenth time without doing it? Just like with Spider-Man, they just kind of took 3 movies to get there.
Yeah.
This one, they did it smartly, but I have questions. So I will say this: when you see the mayor's son, and then that's a reoccurring theme, I'm like, yes, that's a really smart way to remind us that Bruce Wayne was that age when his parents were murdered, and then the little TV monitor showing, back then murdered victim Thomas and Martha Wayne running for mayor, all this other stuff. So that's a good way to remind people. But my question about this film is, do you need to know that already in order to understand this movie? Because if you don't know anything, which I can't conceptualize not knowing anything about the Batman, but if you don't, because there's people out there who don't,
Sure.
what would that mean? Because I think everything else can play. I think this movie can play to a non-Batman audience, and it still plays. I have questions about that too, though. We can discuss further.
I think that the Riddler character allows you an entry, if you're a person who doesn't know anything about Batman, allows you an entry into the Bruce Wayne character because of the exposition that he has throughout the movie. So that helps. But I also think that this movie wasn't necessarily made for people who don't know anything about Batman, the character, because at some point in your life, you've probably run across some iteration of Batman. It's like, how do people know about James Bond? Well, either when they were a kid, they saw it on TBS, or when they were a kid, or when they were, whatever, in middle school or whatever, they went out to the movie theaters and saw Roger Moore in a movie, or they saw it, on cable, or they went to see Daniel Craig in Casino Royale or something. Like, at some point in your life over the last 60 years, you've probably run across the character of James Bond. And in the same way, at some point in your life, even if you have never picked up a comic book, you've probably run across the character of Batman. So just in general, I'm sure Matt Reeves and Warner Brothers are like, you know what, we're just going to skip past the whole complete origin story and figure it out through the plot, which ties heavily to his origin and to what the Batman character is and how it relates to Bruce Wayne. I think in this movie, there's very few times when you see him as Bruce Wayne, and you don't need much to know that Bruce Wayne as a person is a recluse. Still, for me, I have a lot of questions too. And even though it was a long movie, I didn't feel like it was 3 hours long. I had no idea what the duration was. I assumed it was 2 to 2.5 hours long. I was completely wrong. And I even went to a 10 o'clock showing. But then when I got out to my car and I'm like, oh my God, it's 1:15 or whatever. And I was like, all right, okay, fine. But there was never a time when I felt where it felt long. And that's a really good sign, especially for a movie this long. There were so many things I loved about it. I mean, I think first and foremost for me, the score was amazing. And it's something that I will definitely revisit, in the future. And it's going to go to the top of my scores playlist. Michael Giacchino, who's been very busy, scored this movie. And I thought that the production design was great. And the sound design was amazing. There were some really great shots. They got some really cool shots that were very kind of close up, tied to the motorcycles, all that stuff that made it more dynamic visually. And this movie, I don't think it could have been made as far as how it was shot and how it was so dark. The movie was so dark. I'm not talking about the subject matter. I'm talking about the actual just what's on the screen. I don't think you could have made this 15 years ago, 20 years ago. We just didn't have the digital cameras capable to show you what's on screen and be able to differentiate, one thing from another like you can on screen in a big movie theater screen and it still be so dark. But I agree with you. I definitely have questions. I felt like Matt Reeves definitely has a tone to this movie, and it definitely wants to make it seem, it is like a detective movie, but then I had issues with where I was supposed to be as an audience member in the movie in certain parts. And it felt like to me there were very contained vignettes that I just absolutely loved. And then there were parts of the movie that seemed like either they maybe didn't need to be there, although they were engaging. It just seemed like I didn't know how all the puzzle pieces fit together.
Well, I agree with everything you said. Let me continue to start by saying, I cannot be objective. So any form of, I'm going to say it
So
again.
you're
because
gonna
any
love
form
it
of-
no matter what. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm going to find something in it that I love because it's the Batman. So it's a retelling or it's a new interpretation of this world. So I want to make sure that everybody out there is understanding that I did love it. I did enjoy it very much so. I agree. The 3 hours does not seem like 3 hours. I agree with what you said about the score. The cinematography is amazing. The production design is amazing. His costume slash bat suit looks amazing because it's so dark. Everything just looks, you still can see detail, but it seems right. And when he comes out of the dark and that whole opening sequence with the narration, it reminds me of a comic book that I suppose had an influence on this movie called The Long Halloween, which they just made into an animated series. I recommend reading the graphic novel before seeing that animated series because the graphic novel is brilliant, but it kind of starts like that. And to go back to what you were saying about they make him more of a recluse and that he's Bruce Wayne. We don't see Bruce Wayne that much, and we don't see. Do we see Wayne Manor on the outside? I can't remember. I know.
So Wayne Manor is in downtown. I think it's a perfect way of doing it. It's a Gothic tower. It's not.
That's what I thought.
And so that's
Okay.
why when you see him, because I think he like gets out of his car at one point and he's like looking, or gets out of some sort of mode of transportation, and he's looking up because he knows that
Right.
Alfred is in there, and you kind of see this. It's like in the middle of all these skyscrapers. It's this like old Gothic tower, and that's
Okay.
what he
All
lives
right.
in.
Because I couldn't remember if we were supposed to believe that the Batcave was underneath another place that we hadn't seen yet, and that they were purposely not showing us that yet, because there were a lot of
No,
things
it's
that
downtown because he
Okay.
uses the subway to get to it.
Right. And then he goes down the stairs and goes
Yep.
underneath the thing with the motorcycle. Okay, yeah. That's what I thought. Brilliant. I think that's a great reinterpretation. I think that's a modern day interpretation of it. It's kind of been an interpretation we've been flirting with in the last couple of movies because Christian Bale has that penthouse. Christian Bale never stays in the mansion. Ben Affleck's Batman's mansion is burned down. You know, so there's been different interpretations. Here's the thing. Is it that Bruce Wayne is a recluse, or is he like every normal human being who has to put their best foot forward at work? So your family goes to the side, your lover goes to the side, your kids go to the side, and your job becomes primary thing. Or you've been working for 15 years, your wife gets pregnant, you have your first kid, and next thing you know, you're calling out sick because your kid's sick and your focus switches. Okay, so his focus is less than 2 years, because I got the impression this was the beginning of the second year of him being Batman. Enough was established already, so they can have that rapport, him and Gordon, Jeffrey Wright. Jeffrey Wright. When is he getting his Oscar nomination? Man, he's amazing. What does he not do right? Anyway, so they did enough to establish all of that. But I was thinking, and people are starting to nitpick, which is human nature, I suppose. They're saying, well, he's not the billionaire Bruce Wayne guy who's has one face during the day and one face at night. And I was like, he doesn't have time for that. He doesn't know that that's part of it yet. He hasn't figured out that people are going to put together, if they're going down that line, which they don't really bother with in this new Batman film, The Batman. But my thought was, it's insignificant that Bruce Wayne at 20-something years old isn't playing the billionaire philanthropist to disguise the fact that he's Batman at night. He is only 8 years away from his parents dying. You know, when you're a kid and your parents die, you pretty much have the rest of your life as that's always going to be an issue. And nobody can expect you to ever just get over it, you know? Okay, it's time. It's been 10 years since your parents died, Bruce. Come on out of you being a recluse. It's not going to happen. So I thought of it differently. I thought of it as he's so focused on being the Batman, he doesn't have time to think about anything else. And they actually add that in because he's supposed to meet those business guys. And he's like, that's today? I don't want to do that today. I'm not doing that today. And he's like, you have to do this. This is something you have to do.
Yeah.
So they're going along those lines, but I just think that he's too focused on Batman to worry about anything else. And then my questions begin with, Okay, so how do I look at this film? Objectively, impossible. I accept that. Do I want to see it again? Yes. Was it hard to go see another movie instead of this movie, the last movie I went to? Yes, it was. I saw The Worst Person in the World.
Oh,
and
dang, I want to see that.
yeah. Oh my God. You're going to love it. It's so good. It's so good, dude.
Okay.
The hype is real with that one too.
Nice.
It's good. Yeah. My heart's filled with that movie. Anyway, and when I was driving there, I was like, there's no obligation. I've not bought a ticket to The Worst Person in the World. I have not obligated myself. I could go see the Batman again. The place was packed. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many people here. What am I going to do? And I was like, no one's going to see my Norwegian subtitled film. I'm sure that theater's not going to be that packed. And I was talking to the guy at the concession. He's like, yeah, we had a 6 o'clock, a 7 o'clock, and 8 o'clock. And they were 75% packed to capacity with Batman. And I was like, oh my God, that's way too many people right now for...
Yeah. That's why I went to a 10 o'clock showing.
Yeah. Well, I went during the afternoon on a Monday, and there were people, but not a lot. Anyway, yes, I'm dying to see it again. I can't wait to see it again. I can't wait for it to come on to HBO Max so I can watch it, pause it, look at it, absorb it. But my ultimate question comes down to this. The Riddler is my favorite villain. Always has been, always will be. I think he's the smartest villain. I think he's the most maniacal. There's something interesting to me. He's always the smartest guy in the room. He always really almost gets away with it. A couple times he has gotten away with it. He's the only one in Batman history that has figured out who he is. The only one. Bane figures it out later on, but that's based on something else. He's the only one who even tried to figure it out, really, and he did. So I've always admired the green costume and the question marks and the purple mask. I dig all that. I love the 1960s version. Frank Gorsha, I love that. If I was skinny enough when I was that age, I would have worn that costume at Halloween. I love the Riddler. So my question is this. Did Matt Reeves and whoever else helped with the screenplay kind of cop out a little bit? Because could he have done this movie with more of a traditional looking Riddler? Not as traditional as Jim Carrey and not as traditional as Frank Gorsha, but something more traditional than Zodiac meets
Gimp.
Yes. Yes. Oh, creepy. Totally works. And a great interpretation. And I love the fact that everybody's nicknames are not explained and the Penguin is the Penguin and they never call her Catwoman and they don't do any of that stuff. But is the movie so reality-based that do we need Batman as a character in this movie? Could this movie be made with just a recluse detective who's a billionaire who's got nothing better to do with his time than to figure out why the Riddler's doing what he's doing?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes.
Yeah. I mean, why a cape? Why not a trench coat?
Right. Exactly. And so to me, that's a little problematic, just minimal, but it's still just a little bit of a problem. It still has to have a fantastical quality to it. And that's why now everybody's bashing on the Christopher Nolan films. And I'm like, okay, people, slow down. They're pretty damn good. They won Oscars. Calm down. But I think he blended the best of the both worlds. I think he made The French Connection and a Batman movie in The Dark Knight. He made those two movies and put them together. So the long tirade is about if you're not going to follow some of the legend and put in some of the unrealistic qualities to a Batman comic, then is this a Batman movie or is it just a thriller? Zodiac meets Saw meets The French Connection. Then why make it a Batman film?
Well, are you going to get $200 million for your detective movie?
Well, Mr. Clever Bond. That's not the point, though.
Yeah.
That's not the point. Of course not. Of course, that's the obvious answer is of course not. And I know what you're saying. I'm just saying, but do you understand what I'm asking?
No, I get it. Yeah. You're saying like, where's the Batman in the Batman? But he's picking and choosing what he wants about it. And I think
fine.
that Matt Reeves is so interested in why someone would decide, and this is, I mean, other filmmakers have gotten into this too, but he's so interested in why someone would decide to put on a cape and a cowl to deal with their own pain and their own sorrow and feel like they have to push that out into the world. And every guy that he busts his face open, he feels like he's busting the face open of the guy who killed his family. And that's the way for him to deal with his grief. And so I think this movie series, which I did not even know it was a series, that's how little I knew about this before I went into it. This movie should have been titled The Batman Part 1, like Dune, where people strap in and they're like, okay, Part 1, got it. I get it. But yeah, this movie was not. I was expecting a Joker thing where it was kind of like, oh, Robert Pattinson played Batman for one movie, and that was kind of cool. But then I found out he's like signed on for 3 total movies, and it's going to be a whole thing.
Yeah, but I think that happened a little bit later because I think Matt Reeves originally wanted to do one film, and that's what enticed Robert Pattinson. I think. Don't quote me on that. Okay, so but you're saying that you got all of that stuff from this movie. You got the psychological understanding. I'm trying not to sound sarcastic. Hard for me. Sorry. Sometimes my passion gets mixed up with my tone and I can't get it straight. So sometimes I'm overly passionate and sometimes it seems sarcastic, but it's not meant to be. So I don't mean to offend anybody, including you, if I do sound that way. My point is that all that stuff that you just described sounds like we got that in other movies. I didn't get any of that in this movie. There is no psychological explanation or exploration of why a man would dress as a bat and go out and do what he does. None. What's there? And then it's only until closer to the end of the movie, which I thought was quite clever, how they wove that together and how the Riddler and him were on the same, and they're the exact same thing that we were talking about earlier in the podcast about, well, if Batman went one way and Edward, whatever his last name is, went the other way, then maybe the roles would have been reversed. And the Gimp would have been trying to stop the Bat from Gimp and the Bat has a ring, doesn't it?
They're both dealing with their trauma in a different way, and neither way is necessarily the most wholesome. So, I mean, you've got a guy who's this has been an issue I've had with Batman, the Batman character for the longest time. It's like you're a billionaire and you don't want to go out and help people by, I don't know, like coming up with initiatives to curb crime or come up with ways to deal with drug addiction with all of your billions of dollars. You decide you want to like pour it into a insane Batmobile and drive it around and punch one guy at a time. I don't know. There's ways to take down the Batman character if his sole focus is to eliminate crime in Gotham. There's a much more efficient way of doing that than walking around and beating up people. They try to make it seem, especially at the very beginning, the voiceover at the very beginning, it's not that he goes out every night and beats everybody up. It's that he's gone out enough nights and beat up enough people to get people to kind of look around and
I love that.
Understand that they're taking a real chance by, trying to stick up this bodega owner, and I like that too, because it's the best excuse or the best explanation I've seen for why you would even think that this might be efficient or might be effective. And that scene is a good way of an entry into this particular character. But my issues come back to, is this a movie where like we're supposed to be with Batman, with Bruce Wayne, in trying to like actually figure out these clues and all of this, or are we just supposed to see him be the master detective or something? Those were the issues that I started having with the movie, like as it went on and as the Riddler's plots got more complicated and more complicated, and it was just pretty much, I guess the Riddler is just trying to make people understand that he's much smarter than they are, because he comes up with these schemes that are impossible to stop, I guess. The Riddler character seemed like a difficult character for me, but by the time we get to the end, I guess we'll start getting into spoilers maybe, but by the time we get to the end of the movie, and they start to tie that character into Bruce Wayne's character, that made that character pay off a little bit more for me. I just didn't understand, like, as an audience, what we were supposed to be doing in the middle of the movie. The one thing that kind of unlocked it for me, and it was after the movie, so it's a not in the middle of the experience for me, but I did listen to it was like a Dolby podcast talking about sound and sound design, and it had Matt Reeves and Michael Giacchino and the sound design team all on the podcast together, and they were kind of talking about how the score was kind of like an internal, it was supposed to be internalized, not like, you know, look at this man up on the top of a building, he's heroic. It was supposed to be like kind of what Bruce was feeling at the time when we were hearing the score. So we were seeing him and we were hearing the score that he was internally hearing in his head. We're not supposed to be necessarily like third-party objective observers. We're supposed to be in there with him. It's not supposed to be like, oh, look how cool Batman is. We're supposed to be kind of like, I need to be supporting Batman in this thing. Whereas that's the opposite of most superhero movies. You don't want vulnerability in your hero. And this movie has a lot of parallels with Iron Man, and you start to see vulnerabilities in heroes, I think, starting with Iron Man. I mean, some of the Batman stuff too, but some of the Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale stuff too, maybe. But I felt like, you know, Iron Man was kind of a turning point. And one of the big things at the end of the movie where Riddler says Bruce Wayne's name while he's talking to Batman and there's a camera there, you can kind of assume that maybe that's going to come out in the second movie, that it's going to become public, much like at the end of Iron Man. Everybody knows that Tony Stark's Iron Man because he says it. So yeah, I think that this movie is, and maybe instead of Batman Year 2, it should be called Batman Act 1, because it's an incomplete arc for a character. It's just like the jumping off point, I think. And I was expecting a contained movie, and maybe that's where my frustration came.
It's fascinating. I get it, though. I had that same sense. I would not have been able to articulate it like that, but that makes a lot of sense. So let's backtrack really quick. As for the thing about doing something good for Gotham that isn't beating people up at night, that's mentioned in the Christopher Nolan film. And then he says you can give the police this information when he's talking to Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne. Well, why are you doing this? Well, because I'm the only one. No. You can equip the police department with your knowledge and with your technology. Why are you not doing that? And as for where you're supposed to be at with the film, I think what's disconcerting or maybe disconnecting is that there's a lot of point of view shots from Batman, you know, and I didn't really realize that in the trailer, that when you see him walking into that one murder scene, he's walking past all the cops and the Nirvana song was playing in the trailer.
He's following Lieutenant Gordon.
It's a point of view.
Yeah.
It's a point of view. And there's a lot of POV shots in the film. And I'm not saying that you're supposed to be Batman or you're supposed to be inside Batman's psyche, but you're supposed to see things through his eyes. And I think that's new and I think that's different.
And the contact.
Yeah, and the contact, right.
Because he takes it off and he like is able to roll through what he saw earlier. So we're actually seeing what he was seeing at that point.
Correct. So, and that's a little bit different. As for empathy, I think that, and once again, let me state for the record, I cannot be objective, but I have empathy for anybody whose parents died at the age of 10. I mean, a lot of famous people's parents have died and they have become who they have become in defense of the pain of their parents dying. So I think that's always there. And I think that what happens is in this particular movie, it gets so intricate with how Selena Kyle is connected to Falcone, who's Falcone in the other film. Harkonnen, Freeman, Friendman, you know, so there's like all these names. Anyway, so how is she connected? And then how is she connected to the Penguin? Why is he called the Penguin? And then wait a second, there's this serial killer who's sending actual things to Batman. And I know you're not supposed to think it's really cool, but the whole way he writes and the whole little symbols and everything, very cool.
I mean, it's right out of David Fincher, though. It's like David Fincher should be like a executive producer on this movie.
It's Seven meets Zodiac meets Saw meets the Saw movies. You know, anybody
true.
who puts a neck thing around something and something goes kaboom, it's the Saw movies. And I don't have a problem with any of that, but all of that stuff, it's trying to connect a puzzle and you don't know what the picture is. So you don't have the box. And some people do puzzles like that. I cannot. I need a reference. I need a code. I need a thing. So I think there's so many things going on that you're trying to connect that you disconnect from a human feeling towards this character. And it leaves you wondering things about, well, was that important? Was that important? Okay, well, if Gordon did this, then why didn't Batman do this? And you're so in that space of mind. And I get it, because this is the first Batman film since Batman's been put on screen, with the exceptions of some of the 1930s black and white films. Some of them do an okay job with this, where he's truly a detective.
Did you feel like you were supposed to figure it out in the middle of the movie, or figure out like what the tie-in was? Like, I just, it's not a Murder, She Wrote episode. Like, I don't feel like there's any way to figure it out, but that's what that's the feeling that I kind of got from, like, that they wanted us to like be in lockstep with Batman. I don't know.
How is that possible though? They don't give you anything. They don't give you enough. And actually, I enjoyed this experience. I can't wait to see it again. And I don't want to sound like I'm bashing on it, but I do have a lot of questions. And one of my questions is, why does everything end up related to the hero and something the hero had happen and did when he was 10 years old, that somebody else had a same orphanage experience, and yet Selina's an orphan. Now we're going to find out the Penguin's an orphan. Was Falcone an orphan? Like, are they all orphans and they're all like in an orphanage, and they decided to not make a Guillermo del Toro film, so they made a Matt Reeves film, and now we're in the middle of a Batman film? Like, why is it always that? And then at the end of it, it's always this, I'm going to take down Gotham by flooding it, by cold fusion turned to nuclear power bomb, to two boats destroying each other in the river. And, you know, here we go, he says, and click, click, and nothing happens because they decided not to take the detonators in the Dark Knight. It always comes down to that. And so when it came down to that in this film, I was like, I'm just a little bit disappointed, because I thought it was adding up to something not that, but it was exactly that. Now, granted, that whole last sequence is exciting as hell. I loved everything about being in the Coliseum. I loved all the fight sequences in the Coliseum. I loved all of the swinging, I loved all of that. But didn't it end up exactly where they all end up? But none of this started that way, and none of it felt that way. And then all of a sudden, pictures of orphans, and it's a revenge film based on it's not Bruce Wayne's fault that you were an orphan.
Yeah, it's based on just money. Like, it's like, I didn't get the money that I was supposed to get. But, you know, when you look at it from the Riddler's point of view, it's more of like if you look at this movie as the Riddler as opposed to the Batman, then the Riddler is the hero because he fought corruption. He fought the corruption of the mayor. He fought the corruption of the police department. He eliminated people in power who were taking advantage of the funds that were supposed to go to orphans. I mean, like, who would be against that? Who would be against getting those people out of power? But he decided to just murder them. Like, he sidestepped the justice system, kind of in the same way that Batman sidesteps the justice
system. I was just getting ready to say, two roads, and they were parallel for the longest time, and then they just split. And really the question becomes, you're right, where does that line get drawn? Because how many people did Batman kill in the process of this 3 hours?
He doesn't kill people.
How many?
Though. Like, this Batman doesn't kill people.
How many people died because of what happened when the Batman chose to not try to kill people?
Yeah.
People had to have died falling from that thing and all that other stuff. When he cuts that line, I mean, somebody there died. I'm sure of it. And if they didn't, I do love how they interjected that kind of stuff in the film, though. No guns. That's your thing. Like, that's excellent.
It's like, he's a police officer. Come on. Yeah, of course he's going to have a gun.
The line reading is Oscar worthy alone. I mean, that's your thing. And then when he says to him at one point, he was like, "I've known you for 2 years. I don't know who you are. You haven't told me who you are." It's like, oh yeah, that's always been there, and that's been something Gordon has probably thought. But have we ever had a question of that? I trust you, he says. That's what he says.
Yeah.
But I still don't know who you are. So
Well,
how far can I trust you?
That's like a lot of, I mean, just the lines that have to be said, like when Bruce goes into, or I guess when Batman goes into Catwoman, Selena Kyle's apartment, and he's like, "You got a lot of cats." And it's
I love that.
Yeah, okay, everybody was thinking that, obviously, so we just move on from there. And there's a lot of transportation in this movie, like Batman and Catwoman, especially going from place to place. And it made me realize that I've never seen Batman in the passenger seat of a car. It just made, because like there was a scene where they needed to get into, like they needed to go from point A to point B. He was with Gordon. I think he's with Lieutenant Gordon. And he's like, all right, we need to go here. Yeah, I think it's when Penguin is about to hurt Catwoman. And it's when they find the body of Catwoman's friend, roommate, whatever. So Gordon and Batman are like in point A and they need to be at point B. And it's just like, well, the most efficient way to do that would just be to like get in a car and drive. But, Batman can't fit like two people in his Batmobile. And so he's not going to just like sit in the passenger seat of a sedan while his cowl rubs up against the headliner.
Eating Twizzlers.
Yeah. So they just cut from them leaving to Gordon shows up and he's like, "I'm here." And Batman's like, I'm already here. And so that's how they dealt with that. But it just made me, I don't know, it just made me think like they're definitely kind of like the scene in Deadpool where he's like in the back of a taxi cab at the beginning of the movie, where you're just like, yeah, that would be weird, right? But yeah, there's no way that Batman will ever be the passenger of a car.
So that begs the question, is that your way of thinking of things, or is the film so realistic and so grounded in what is the true possibility of Batman, which I'm impressed that they even came up with even more of a realistic version after Nolan's films, because I thought that was pretty, like, I believe the Batman could exist. When Morgan Freeman puts that glove to the memory cloth and it goes zoop, and it makes that kind of bat wing. And he was like, an electrical current flows through that. It's called memory. And I was like, oh, I'm buying everything else that they tell me as a gadget from this point on, because that's clever as hell and that's really inventive. So I'm wondering, is this film so etched in reality, finger quotes, that your mind can't help from thinking of things like, what would the Batman do if he had to ride along? Would he be in the back seat? Would he be in what would he drive? I'm driving.
Yeah.
And Gordon be like, shotgun. So in a way, I think what I was talking about earlier is going to continue to flow through my head until I just completely accept it for what it is. And a lot of the trappings are in my own head, but it's so based in reality that universe, if you will, of reality, that these questions do come to mind. Like, why doesn't anybody try to arrest him? Why doesn't anybody look underneath his cowl? He passes out, 3 times? Which I thought was great, by the way, because I love when they make him vulnerable, but sometimes he gets his ass kicked so much that you're like, how does he even do what he's doing? But that made him vulnerable in a completely different way. So did Gordon keep him safe when they brought him back to the police station? And why didn't they just lock him up then? Like, that didn't make any... Did Gordon stop him from locking it up? There was so much reality there that those questions kept coming to my head. Well, let me just stop for just a second, because we haven't had a chance to mention Zoe Kravitz. We mentioned Catwoman, but we haven't mentioned her. Back to you have a lot of cats. I have a thing for strays. That's a brilliant line reading right there for her, too.
Yep.
You can see she's vulnerable. You can see that she's a stray. You can see that he's a stray. You can see this humanness in her face, and I thought she was excellent. So much so that how are they ever going to put her in a real cowl? Like, are they ever going to really give her a Catwoman mask? I mean, can she wear one at this point? She's such a real person, etched out so brilliantly in the screenplay and in performance that it it might seem a tad bit ridiculous to go ahead and put goggles on her and cat ears and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason she had that on is because she's a cat burglar. She needed something to cover her face, but still be able to see. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense that she styled it in the way that she styled it, and she has the long nails and all that stuff. But
that's the best part of her costume right there.
Because she has them the whole time. Yeah.
Yes, and they poke out of her costume, and you get a really nice shot when she's leaving at the end of the film, and that really, it gives you the representation of Catwoman that you need. And I thought that was great that they didn't play on that until it just seemed organic.
So yeah, and she's great. I just watched Steven Soderbergh made another movie, and it's on HBO Max, and it's called Kimmy, and it doesn't necessarily hold together. It really falls apart at the end, but she's great. She's the star of it, and she plays a woman who's after the pandemic. She worked from home before, but after the pandemic, she is just like completely reclusive, and she doesn't ever want to go outside. She has I don't know if it's necessarily agoraphobia, but she's very intensely afraid of leaving the house. And she works for a company that has an Alexa or a, okay, Google, thing. And they're everywhere in people's houses. And she's a person who analyzes incorrect uses, where if you're like, hey, turn on the light, and then they're like, I don't know what you mean. And then she goes in there and she's like, oh, they said turn on the light. And then, she types it in and helps the AI learn better. But then it's very, I mean, it's the conversation, it's Blowout, it's all those movies where somebody hears something or sees something. It's Blow Up, actually, where a person has a recording of a crime, and then they have to try to figure out who did it, or where this person is, or what for her it was like, I need to report this, and then that's how the movie kicks off. But
what is the difference between Blowout and Blow Up? What were you saying?
Blow Up is an Antonioni movie from the 60s where it's a photographer, and he's taking pictures, and he accidentally takes a picture of, I think it's like a mobster killing a woman. And so he has a negative and all that stuff. Blow Out is Brian
John
De
Travolta.
Palma movie, John Travolta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
and he takes,
which I know about.
And he gets an audio recording of something happening, and then
blowout of a tire.
Yeah, there you go. And then, but I'm sure that they called it Blow Out because of Blow Up. I'm sure that De Palma was probably a fan of Antonioni by that time. And then The Conversation is a Francis Ford Coppola movie where same kind of a thing, Gene Hackman recorded. So yeah, but those are all interesting movies. I wasn't that big of a fan of Blowout though. But anyway, so same kind of a thing. Kimmy was a similar thing, but definitely not to that echelon. But I'll watch any Steven Soderbergh movie he makes. So, I was there for it. And if he can get people like Zoe Kravitz to star in him, then that even better, because I don't think I've seen her in anything that I didn't like. She was in Big Little Lies. I mean, she's been in a lot of great stuff, whether it's TV or movie. Oh, and she was in High Fidelity too, which I think they canceled that after one season. But I don't know. I mean, she was great in that too. It made sense. It was she had a good connection with the camera, which is essential for that kind of a show. But yeah, I agree. I think she did great. Colin Farrell, the Penguin. I think I saw somewhere that he gets tied up, and at one point he's tied up and he gets up and he waddles away. And so that was a little like Easter egg, like he was waddling away like a penguin. Nobody knows why he's called the Penguin, but
I like that. I liked it. And I love how he goes, Oz, my name's Oz. And he doesn't really say Oswald Cobblepot, and you don't really know anything about him. I like that. The only thing I don't particularly care for is all those middle-aged guys who are frumpy and have bad skin and can really act, but now they can't because good-looking people keep getting made into looking like them. So
Jared Leto's made a living out of it.
Yeah, they made a joke about the casting call for the movie Monster with Charlize Theron.
Yeah.
20-something-year-old woman, been in the sun too long, little frumpy, smokes all the time, has a harsh voice. Everybody apply. And then, they cast Charlize Theron.
Great.
And she knocks it out, man. She knocks it out. There's no doubt about it. And I think Colin did too. I thought he was great. I liked his line readings. I liked his character. I liked how he was still a minor character, but a major character. That's so Penguin. I love the chase sequence that's in the trailer. By the way, whoever cut the trailer is a genius because they got all the right parts without giving too much away. They did really good. They did really good.
But they kind of messed with something in the way, the Nirvana song, and that really bugged me, but they didn't really touch it that much in this movie. Like they kind of messed with it. They messed with the recording, but they weren't like synchronizing punches to it like in the trailer.
Well, I mean, but that's a trailer. And now it's in a different part of the movie too. But yeah, so I the whole I got you. I thought he was excellent. I mean, I couldn't see it was him. I think his character makes sense. He's that middle-leveled mob guy. Makes perfect sense. I loved when Catwoman Selena Kyle walks in and sees the Batman for the first time and says, "Oh," and he goes, "Don't worry about him." And then she goes to serve him, and she kind of smiles at him, like because she knows the Penguin and she recognizes that this is a customer and all that other stuff. I thought all of that was really well played. I thought they did a really great job at not becoming mega misogynistic about her character because they could have very easily done that and they didn't. Thank goodness. She's the smartest one in the room when she's in the room, and she's there to protect herself and Anya. I got the impression that they might have had a relationship at some point, because the way she responds to her or the way she talks about her, and that might just be an affectionate thing, it might just be a friendship thing, but I'm not so sure. But I liked all of that mystery. I liked all of that. You had to figure it out by Zoe Kravitz's performance, and I think I took what I took from it. I don't know if I took the right stuff, but yeah. So I thought the Penguin was great.
Yeah. Oh, me too. And as far as Penguin, like the what I wrote down was Colin Farrell's Penguin had the right amount of audaciousness. He towed that line between what movie is he in? Like he's in the same movie. He's in the same world as the brooding Robert Pattinson, but he's still, I could see a person in that world acting like he acts, but it works. Did you like the Nirvana Something in the Way thing? Like, I thought that was a really nice, I'm glad they used it in the movie because if it was just a trailer song, it felt like it would have been a missed opportunity. And it really, really tied into the score. Like the Batman theme is based on like the chord changes for that song. I mean, they're the same. So the theme part, and also I did see that it's the same notes as the first four notes of Darth Vader's theme. So that's a whole nother. It's because this theme is dun 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 dun, and everybody knows the. I don't want to get like banned off of YouTube or whatever for like singing Imperial March because I'm sure that would happen. So I'm not even going to do it. So anyway.
Let's see what happens. Go ahead, do it. Let's see what happens.
Dun, 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 dun. That, yeah, so it's
similar.
Similar, yeah. I thought that was so cool. And I just, man, the theme was great.
There was a split second when I realized they weren't using it in the scene from the trailer, and that was a tad bit disappointing. And then it was a split second of acceptance when they started to use it in the film. But other than that, I thought it was brilliant. Other than that, I thought it's exactly the song you should use. And I love the fact that something, what is that, 1992, 94, somewhere around there?
94-ish, yeah, 93.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
It's still relevant in a 2022 film, and it's still relevant to the darker edges of the world that we live in. And I like that kind of stuff. I like when, because there's some 11-year-old, 12-year-old kid out there who's now searched out who sings that song? What is that song about? Mm-hmm. And then their whole world is open in a different way now because of the use of it in the Batman. So yeah, I liked it. I had no problem with it. Once I accepted it very quickly, but there was a moment of acceptance. I was like, oh, it's so cool in the trailer. Yeah. But I accepted it. I was still having questions at that moment in the film when he walks through that library to the first victim, why those cops are okay with that. I'm still
they weren't though. They were like, why is he here? That was,
I know, but nobody stopped. I mean, but if you see something, do something, right? That's the theory, right? So if, people are getting in trouble now about watching something happen and not doing anything about it, they're as in trouble as probably they should be. So why is it why didn't we have one rogue cop? I'll arrest him. I mean, it's not the movie he was making. I get it, but it just poses some questions. But I think that Matt Reeves is smart enough about the Batman to know that these questions have been posed, and he's going to answer the ones that he thinks are significant to the next two films. Yeah. Because there's a thing going around on Twitter that the mayor's son is going to be Robin because of the focus on him. And Matt Reeves said, nope, never an intention. But I love that that's what people are thinking, because that is a significant character in this movie and a significant character to Bruce Wayne's life, that it makes sense. And he loves the fact that something organically has grown out of something that he never even considered, not for a split second. Yeah. It's not like he thought of it and then 86'd it. He never even thought it. That young kid is there as a vehicle to represent Bruce's past, Batman's past. That's it. But people have snowballed that into a bunch of different things, which is brilliant, because that's what you make the movie for. And then you let and you let it go. And if it develops into something else, that's brilliant.
Okay, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that we were both wrong about when Nirvana's album Nevermind came out. It came out in 1991, so it was even earlier.
Okay, I was closer.
You were closer.
I said 1992.
Yep,
and definitely. Actually, I think of it as 1992 because that year of music was impressive. That was, a lot of those albums came out in December of 91, and then in the summer of 92, all of these huge things happened. A ton of different albums that when you start naming them, you're like, wait, that cannot be the same year, but it is.
The Batmobile was pretty awesome, and it definitely is in keeping with other Batmobiles in that it's not even necessarily like a modified car that you can even, because I thought it was going to be like a Corvette that he souped up or something, but it's not. It's like pieces of metal shoved together on top of a frame of maybe an existing car with a totally different engine on it and a friggin' jet engine connected to the back of it. So that I was surprised about that, but I was also happy that it, in this kind of a grounded thing, there is no Lucius Fox. There is no, we've got a tank that we're going to give you, or some motorcycle that has the wheels that spin around impossibly.
Love it.
Well, no, it's fine.
Love everything about it.
It's fine, but it's not. And the shots, I mean, in those Nolan movies, the shots of him riding on that like motorcycle, pretty much like prone, and then also with the cape flying on behind. I mean, come on, man! Like you can't lose. But I think that was, you got a little bit of that with him in like essentially a stock motorcycle riding around, and a lot of those shots, man, they have, these cameras are so small now. They use like an Alexa Mini LF that is like, it's an RE camera that you can fit a cinema lens on it, but the camera itself is like, imagine the size of a Rubik's Cube. That's how big the camera is. And so you can fit that wherever you want. So they connect it to the side of the motorcycle, and they get it so close to the motorcycle that you don't feel like it's, those like car commercials where there's like a camera next to the car and it's like kind of connected to the car, but not really. And you just feel like there's a little bit of a separation between you and the subject that the camera is locked to. But a lot of these shots, especially the motorcycle shots, it was so close to the motorcycle, you felt like you were part of the whole thing and not a separate observer. So those are really, really cool shots. I mean, we've seen them in other movies, and you've seen them in like, Fast and Furious and stuff like that. But it seems like they're getting better and better, and this was one example of that. So this movie it took like 5 years to make, and it was initially supposed to be Ben Affleck playing Batman, doing a movie that Ben Affleck was writing the script for, and it was gonna be more of like a James Bond type of a movie, like going a bunch of different places, and I don't know if it was espionage or what it was, but I think maybe they were gonna, springboard off of Justice League and get Batman, I don't know, on the beach or something. I don't know. But he said they brought
so
Matt Reeves
silly.
in like just for a meeting on Batman, and they're like, you know, maybe just to like get his thoughts on it or whatever. He's like, I think he might have even read the script, but he said like, I definitely don't want to do a James Bond Batman. He's like, I wanted to do something more along the lines of a detective movie. And then he assumed they would just be like, okay, nice to talk to you. See you later. But they just scrapped the whole thing, I guess.
Well, Ben Affleck couldn't make it work. He said when he was working on the script that he just couldn't make it work. Well, at least that's what he's saying.
And
Who
maybe
knows how it all breaks down. He said he couldn't bring Batman from the world that he had been in to the world he wanted him to go into. So he's just like, I'm not even going to bother. Plus, I'm aging and I'm older, so he'll have to be an older Batman.
Yeah.
Too many things will have to be assumed. Let's not do that. And so he jumped out.
Yeah.
And so when he jumped out, they probably... Well, I mean, when you have a clear vision like Matt Reeves obviously has, and I want to make my comment about the Batmobile based on that, the Batmobile is like most things in this movie. It's a necessity, not eye candy. There's a purpose for it. It has a purpose. It's not just because he needs a cool looking car. Once again, this is why I refuse to listen to people bashing on the Nolan films, because he does that in the Nolan films too. There's a necessity to it, and where he gets it from makes sense, and how it works makes sense, and how he can do the things that he can do makes sense, and the explanation of why he can he's flying on rooftops. When that happens, there's an explanation for it in those films. And I'm not saying you need an explanation in this new Batman film, but the fact that it's not just about a cool looking car that is part of the legend of Batman or the history of Batman or expected to be in a Batman film, it was a necessity at that moment. Because when you first see the Batmobile, it's covered up in the Batcave.
Yep.
As if he's still working on it.
With all the COVID stops and starts and all that stuff that they had, it just took forever. And I'm guessing that they wanted to get an opening like this versus an opening like they would have had last summer or something, because just you talking about how many people were in all of those showings back to back to back to back, that's the kind of an opening you need for a movie nowadays. And that's why they're holding back like Top Gun Maverick, who I think this guy also wrote, I think Peter Craig, or he wrote the story for Top Gun Maverick. And then Christopher McQuarrie, I think, wrote the actual script. But this guy who worked with Matt Reeves, Peter Craig, co-wrote this movie.
Peter Craig is the son of Sally Field and Steve Craig.
Wow,
That's got to be the Sally Field, right?
I would assume.
Well, let me just say something. When I looked at his picture, I was like, oh, he's cute.
Does he look like Sally Field?
I guess he's cute.
She was married to a guy named Stephen Craig. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's put it this way. I would have a chance. I'm just saying. I mean, maybe not, he's like 20 years younger than me, but, there's still a possibility that we could end up talking about the Batman together.
And then also you could read the script for Top Gun Maverick. So, there you go.
Hey, I'm going to drop this off. Can you come with me? Yeah, sure. Where are we going? Oh, Tom Cruise's house. What? Can you even imagine?
No,
dude, I just thought you were cute. I can't do all of this. I can't do all that. Go ahead with your 125 million opening day before it opened. It made 125 million or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's made 164 million domestic. Total of 288 million. So it's only been out for less than a week now. So yeah, it's been out for.
So it must have been 24 million it made when they started showing it at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the Thursday before opening.
Yeah,
which has always confused me.
The
opening then
they really fudge that, because it used to be you could see it like midnight Friday morning,
right?
But then they're like, you know what? Let's just move it back to Thursday night. And then now you can see it on like, I had a buddy who he had an extra ticket for IMAX, and it was for the 1st, March 1st. So Tuesday. I don't know. Maybe IMAX got it early because it's IMAX, even though none of this movie was shot with any IMAX film because the whole movie was shot digitally. So I'm sure it looks great in IMAX. You got anything else?
Well, I just want to talk about the cliffhanger, if you will. I did like the fact that the Arkhams and the Waynes were the founding families of Gotham. Didn't know that before. I don't know if I've ever read that. Yeah, I don't know if that's ever been. So that's clever. I like that. But then you see the Riddler, by the way, who knows who Batman is, and how come he hasn't told anybody? I need that answered.
There's a camera. So this is his big reveal, right? Isn't he's being recorded as he says that, as he's calling Batman Bruce Wayne?
Oh, yeah.
There's a scene in a Kurosawa movie called High and Low at the very end that's the exact same scene. It's like, you have now been caught. You are the bad guy. I will confront you. And then the bad guy explains why he's the bad guy. Very similar.
But that still begs the question of why doesn't the Riddler reveal that at the end when his plot is foiled? How come he doesn't go, okay, I tried to destroy everybody by flooding Gotham, but it didn't work. Batman's Bruce Wayne. Why didn't he do that? That's for another thing. And then that brings me to the cameo that I unfortunately heard about beforehand. And we've been hearing rumors about Barry Keoghan being the Joker, and it looks like that is going to be the way that it is. Although Matt Reeves refuses to say, or he hasn't said, that is the Joker. He hasn't said it's not, and he hasn't said that it is.
They're laughing at the end. Of course he's the Joker.
Of course he is, but Matt Reeves has not said that yet. He's unnamed Arkham
inmate,
right? So, did we need it? Did we want it? Do we need every Batman film to end with the possibility of the Joker coming next?
Batman Begins did.
Totally, 100%. And we're big fans of Barry Keoghan.
Yeah,
we love him. I can't wait to see what his interpretation of it is. It looks like his face is all kinds of messed up. You only see a little bit in the shadow. I couldn't tell whether or not his skin was white or not. Some people say he was wearing makeup. I didn't see it. So the ultimate question is, did that work for you? And was it a necessity?
I have no comment on it because I do have a comment, but of course I have a comment, but I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't expecting it. And when it happened, I was still in the mode of, why isn't this wrapping up in a different way? Because I thought this was supposed to be a one-off movie. And then, it's not. And so you have to change your focus, I think, at that point to be like, this is going to happen again. I feel like it's much more interesting to create an environment and then drop your main character with all of his own baggage or her own baggage that they have from previous iterations of that character, drop them into this new environment and then have them go through it and then get out. And then let's drop them into another environment and have them deal with that. So this is the detective Batman. And then, like you said, a Western Batman, or even there's a Batman Ninja. It's like a samurai Batman animated film. So, is there a way to do that and still make it, I guess, viable commercially? I don't know, but this is shaping up to be a very Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 situation, because in the past, trilogies were not that. Trilogies were, we have a contained movie for movie number 1, we have a contained movie for movie number 2, we have it's like, the villains from movie 2 aren't going to be in movie 3 because they're dead. But in this movie, it seems like that we're just starting to round up the rogues gallery. Nobody's been killed. Nobody's been dealt with. We're just adding. So now instead of just Penguin and Riddler and then Catwoman being not a bad person, but still being tangentially part of that, then going into, now we're adding Joker. And then who are we going to add now? Are we going to add Sandman? Are we going to add Crocodile Head? I don't know. So.
Okay. First of all, did you say Sandman? That's Spider-Man.
Dang it. No, not Sandman. Oh, what is
Killer
it?
Croc. And you're thinking of Scarecrow.
Scarecrow. So, yeah. See?
Which this world, I would like to see their interpretation of the Scarecrow. This world, I'd like to see their interpretation of the Joker. I'm not as bothered as much of this. I think if they didn't add that scene at the end of the film, this could be a one-off. It could have been concluded. He puts the Joker in Arkham, we're done.
Riddler.
I don't think the Riddler. Look at me, I got all puffy chest. I'm telling you all the Batman things and then I mess up myself. That is so my karma. But I didn't have a problem with it being an all-inclusive, confined story. I was fine with it. But then they added that little tag to it, and I just don't know. The reason why I think it made me question was that everything was so realistic and organic to the world that Matt Reeves created. And he created a brilliant world, no doubt about it. But then all of a sudden it becomes such a Batman world at the last 15 minutes, what we're used to. And then that could have been okay if that had ended and we didn't know what was happening next. We thought Selina was actually leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Lieutenant Gordon is still Lieutenant Gordon. No promotion. No, nothing. We're not connected to Metropolis. We're not going to see Green Lantern. We're not going to see Wonder Woman. We're not going to see any of them. End. But that's not what they did. They added in the cameo at the end, which made it even that much more like your traditional superhero film, and in fact, traditionally a Batman film, because they kind of, a few of them end like that. So that was my question. Was it a necessity? I'm not sure it was. I'm curious to see what the actor's going to do, and I'm curious to see what the world is going to be expanded upon and how they're going to incorporate it. But I get what you're saying, and I actually think your idea is a good idea. Why not do Batman Ninja? Why not do Gotham by Gaslight?
Well, the big thing is that they're going to make it. You're going to watch it. You're going to love it. And then you're going to still have questions about it because you love anything Batman, right? I mean, yeah. It's the more Batman, the merrier, right?
Yeah, that could be the whole podcast right there.
All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and we're on YouTube. Just search for the Actor Engineer podcast. And we'll see you next time.